Naka Professor Kettle. Let me just test these technologies out there. Okay. Right, Bulavinak everyone. I realized that I'm in the way, I think, of you and your lunch, so I'll try to be swift. Firstly, on behalf of Global Fishing Watch, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to World Maritime University and other organizing partners, all that are involved in the organizing committee, extending our sincere gratitude for having us in the event. It's been a wonderful 2 weeks of productive sharing. And this issue of IUU is always something that's dear to our heart as a Pacific Islander. I was just talking to Yoni during the break. I myself from here, Pacific Islander, I'm from Fiji, not in the mainland, south, on the southern tip of Vitilevu, an island called Katabu. And growing up, this issue of IUU and poaching has always been there lingering. And we ask ourselves as kids, how do we tackle this thing and how do we combat this thing? And in saying that, I want to nail a point that Yoni had mentioned in the morning, in the overall theme of cooperation and collaborative working. This is something that is key in the region. And it's not until when I furthered studies in higher education, then I realized, no, this is a global issue. And so I want to also acknowledge and thank FFA as our secretariat, who's providing that opportunity for technology platforms and firms like Starboard, Global Fishing Watch, Skylight, to contribute in this space and empower Pacific Islanders in the MCS space to carry out their role. And so, to FFA, now So just an outline of what I'm going to be sharing today. I've been tasked to look at how Global Fishing Watch has worked with Pacific Island countries to combat this issue of IUU. So I'm just going to be sharing stories on how our core countries that we've established relationship, and not only core countries, but also agencies that we partner with, whether it's academic institutions, and researchers to help combat IUU. So a little bit of who we are for those that are not aware of Global Fishing Watch, the data and the tools that we have, and the case studies, of course. So the team is composed of, Global Fishing Watch was established in 2017, so relatively young organization. Started off with a group of tech gurus developing and asking themselves, how could we contribute to the MDA space to combat IUU? And collaboration between Google, Oceania, and SkyTruth made that possible. Officially established as a non-profit in 2017. So it's a unique mix of machine learning engineers, data visualization experts, fishery scientists, and policy experts. Working across, now we are a little over 110 staff working across 30 countries and 14 time zones. And we were just laughing I was just laughing during the break, sharing this with Moritz. It's a challenge working across the time zone, having to wake up, odd hours of the night just to have those calls. But when you have something like an IUU, which is the heart of the issue that we are trying to tackle, trying to combat, I think that keeps you going. So again, our vision, quite ambitious and enthusiastic, but as Yoni has shared in the morning, this can only be achieved through collaboration and genuine and intentional partnerships. And we've been fortunate, having to contribute in the region with a little contribution that we provide to FFA and also our core countries that I will share in a bit. That's PNG, RMI, and Palau. Again, quite ambitious, but the goal throughout the mission is as advance ocean governance through increased transparency of human activity at sea. How do we do that? Creating and public sharing map visualizations data so that it can be accessible to anyone who wants to use it. And this comes down to the heart, to the beating heart of the organization, as transparency is the principle, because we believe that it fosters better planning, policies and planning, accountability, better monitoring, and just that inclusive behavior, including people in the decision-making process. So how do we do that? In the next 5 years, established last year, the strategy is basically we're going to try and work and map out human activity, all human activity out at sea. Again, enthusiastic, but we've done that so far, which I will show in the next slide. Collaborate with governments in the regions that we work in. Pacific region is one, Asia is another one, EU and the Mediterranean and African region. So these are the regions that Global Fishing Watch works in, and just engages and collaborate with governments on the needs that we can support them with. And also having those discussions at the international forum. When we talk about international instruments, we've talked about some last week and early this week, having that engagement at that particular forum. So from when it's established until now, how do we do that? Mapping industrial fishing across the globe. The organization, the team was one of the first that mapped out the global industrial fishing and made it public for anyone who's working in that space to basically use it, including data and also the codes. If you're a data scientist, it's all available on the platform. You can download it, you can use it. Where do we go from here? Like I said, in line with the vision and the strategy that we have, mapping out all human activities in the next 5 years, creating dynamic map and of all visual activity at sea. So we've done that in part, as if you have visited the platform, mapping out and tracking fishing through AIS, which Maurice has talked about, dark fishing, and that's part of the data sets, some of the data sets that I will allude to after this, oil platform shipping, and hopefully other things like feds, when it does come, when we do have the data for it. Just a visual map of the agencies and core countries that we partner with across the globe. As I mentioned, in the region, right here there's RMI, and I'm thankful to, just a few months ago we were at MIMRA having some discussions with Francisco. It's enlightening to have some needs articulated from the team in MIMRA, so working on getting those plans and those needs discussed back and forth, and what we can support them with in the next year. We've had some interesting stories with PNG, which I will share in a few bit. Just again, providing that analytical support to the core countries. The key attributes of the data is basically we have data that goes back until 2012, and when I say 2012, mainly the main data that we have is AIS, as Maurice has already shared. So that goes back until 2012. I think the main thing that I also wanted to point out is Maurice has also shared, it's open, it's access and free. Anyone with a Gmail account, even your Facebook account, can log in and create an account and start to interact with the platform. Yep. And so the data sources, this bit right here, Maurice has touched on it. AIS is the main data component that we have that goes back until 2012. And that constitutes the main tracks and the heat map that you see on the map if you've interacted with it. Also, we have radar or synthetic aperture radar that Yoni has alluded to, which working with agencies or with partner agencies help to detect dark fishing vessels. Optical imagery, high resolution optical imagery, and also night lights, particularly around when we have some questions on suspicious behavior of squids and those operations that happen at night. How does that look? So basically, we glean or harness AIS data and through machine learning algorithms score whether it's a fishing vessel or not, and then from there siphon it down on what particular fishing vessel it may be, whether it's trawling, as you see in the first picture there, long line, or purse seining. Within the data frame, we don't only, it's not that we only have AIS data, but we also have vessel registries that we source from more than 40 publicly available registries, and that's sitting within the platform as well, which just helps users to interact and sort of what Francisco had alluded to in the morning, check the identity, if it's actually the identity that it's saying that it is or not. So what happens is that whatever AIS data that comes in, there's the registry tabs sitting side by side, just helps you or users to match the vessel that you are investigating or you're looking into, whether it's a reefer, long line, or fishing vessel, even carrier vessels as well. Data sets on ports and voyages, transshipment, we refer to, within the platform, we refer to this as encounters, because the algorithm, through the algorithm, it detects it and encounters. I think collaboration with the governments really, who are on the ground as the PSMA or port state measures that, that Francisco alluded to, can really check whether the transshipment activity was actually legal or not. So while we have the data set sitting on the platform, it really just helps government officials check those vessels and those activities in a legality sort of process. And AIS, potential AIS non-transmitting or potential AIS disabling events. So these are the tools that are all integrated in the platform. If you haven't interacted with it, the map and the Marine Manager portal, carrier vessel portal, which helps you drill into individual carrier vessels and their interactions with other carriers and also fishing vessels, and Vessel Viewer, which I just mentioned earlier. This is made possible through the collaboration with TMT, started off in the work in African region with the port programs that's happening in that region, and now it's integrated into the platform as well. So case studies, more of an acknowledgement, like I mentioned earlier, thanking FFA for allowing us to contribute a tiny bit onto the operations that happen with the Intel pre-op report, looking at AIS transshipment and those sort of activities and providing them to our secretariat. This is an interesting case with PNG. We had received a request earlier this year from our partners at the National Fisheries Authority, looking at this particular Indonesian flag vessel, which was conducting suspicious activity of illegal fishing within the High Seas Pocket 1, as Yoni had mentioned. And that particular High Seas Pockets, because it borders most of the Asian fleets, it's quite sensitive to these kind of activities. So this request came in and we looked at the data, looked at the map and looked at the activity. It had 2 accounts of potential illegal fishing activity in the High Seas Pockets before around December last year until early this year, before it proceeded to move into the PNG port. So it was, the team calculated the number of hours and the events, developed the intel report and submitted it to NFA. But this just corroborates whatever evidence that they already have. And might I just add right here that the Pacific region, where we are at the moment, we are really quite ahead in terms of surveillance. And just hearing the sharing that took place this morning from Yoni, and just comparing it, for me as working in Global Fishing Watch, comparing it with other regions like African region, the Pacific is really quite ahead. And I think and I really believe in the spirit of regionalism that our elders had envisioned it at that time, that we are moving it towards that direction. So this is the PNG authorities later on adding with the evidence that they already have seized the vessel and it was fined. Another interesting case is the MV Nika, a notorious vessel that was that's flagged to Panama. Before Panamanian authorities had requested the team to have a look into the vessel itself, the vessel was already at the Interpol's radar for illegal activities. And you could see right here that there's a massive damage on the hull. So that was when it was fleeing the South Georgia Sea. It ran into an iceberg. And so luckily the crew, none of the crew lost their lives, or even captain as well in the ship. But just to say that we had received requests from the Panamanian authority to look into the vessel. When it was registered as a carrier vessel. But when the Panamanian Maritime Authority had a look at the track, they realized, hey, this vessel, I think, is not a carrier vessel. And for safety reasons, when it was registered, it was only allowed to sail within the 200 nautical miles. So looking at the tracks, when the Panamanian Authority looked at the tracks, they concluded this is a vessel that's illegally fishing and falsified its registration info. So this is an interesting case where Panama, like you had alluded in the morning, bilaterally reached out to the Indonesian government and also the Japanese government, working that bilateral relationships, but already it was in Interpol's red list. It was later on, after we provided some vessel of interest analysis, not because it was standing off its AIS, we had to sort to other data sets like SAR, and predicted where it was moving. And it was eventually captured at the Malaccan Strait. This, an interesting case where the Colombian authorities had reached out and asked if you could look at this particular vessel, flagged to Spain, vessel of interest that was supposedly or potentially fishing. Well, there was suspicious of fishing behavior in the Malpa Flora and Fauna Sanctuary. That's right here, and I'll zoom into it a bit. So if you look at the tracks, it was traveling in, and it made this sort of loop around within the marine sanctuary, and it moved further down. And so we received the request to look into the vessel. So the analyst in that region, in the LATAM region, had a look and passed it to the team as well. The team concluded that looking at the tracks, it didn't exhibit activities of illegal fishing, and that was our stance on the matter. There was a bit of back and forth, but eventually when the Colombian authority had asked the vessel operators, they did mention that they had some engine failures right about that time, and the vessel was drifting a bit. Because if you look at the tracks, if you look at the tracks further down here, this is as a longliner, this is what you would expect from the track to look like. But if you see in here, it was just a little loop, and they did come back and said that they had experienced some engine failure. Area of interest analysis. We recently gave some support to the Albanian government. I'm sharing from across the region. Sorry, I didn't mention this before. Work with Global Fishing Watch in the region it's at its genesis stage. We have some cases. We have some work with PNG going on. We're building our work with RMI at the moment. But really, these other regions that I'm sharing at the moment is where Global Fishing Watch started off. And I would also like to share those in the area of interest analysis and also vessel of interest analysis. Definitely in the pipeline to do more of this work within the region with our core countries. But again, that's based on the needs that our core countries will develop collaboratively within the work plans. So this is a case with the EU Mediterranean team had offered support to an NGO who reached out on a potential proposed fishing restricted area. Initially, this was the proposed area of interest to be closed off. One of the reasons is that there's a species of corals that, deep water corals, that they would like to preserve in these shades, in this region. And so this was the initially proposed area. And so we received a request from MedReact, an NGO, to have a look at the fishing activity within this area, and we saw that the Albanian flag vessels, if you were to confirm and adopt this boundary, the impacts on the Albanian flag would be quite substantial. As opposed to the Italian flag on this side, you see that there are not much fishing activity that's protruding into the boundary. And that's because of the bathymetrical line. Trawlers in that region are known to trawl within 600 meters. And so in this particular case, the bathymetry really shows that it's quite deep on this side, but on the other side, you'll see that it encompasses a bit of the trawling activity for Albanian flag. And so when it was proposed to the Albanian government, it was shot down, obviously looking at the socioeconomic impacts of if we were to establish and confirm this particular boundary. And the team re-looked at with MedReact and all the agencies that were working at that time, re-looked at the boundary, and now this is the finalized, which was just approved at the recent GCFCM last month. You heard in the morning about the Joint Analytical Cell. This is a group of agencies who are like-minded, working together with the mutual interest of combating IUU. And so, recognizing these different, data sets and tools that these agencies can provide, will hope, can help progress us in targeted resources in terms of MCS. This is a case in terms of area of interest profiling. The port profiling work that we do with our team or with our core country in the African region, and a lot of this has already been shared by Francisco. And one of the things that I would like to reiterate here as well is that in the Pacific region, we are quite ahead. We are quite ahead. A lot of these countries that we did the port profiling program with, they've signed and ratified the convention, but as Francisco had alluded to, sometimes it's really difficult to implement it when there's, processes are not in place. So what really had happened is collaborated with TMT, went in and helped out these particular countries, which is Kenya, Ghana, and the other two countries, doing port profiling just to see what fishing vessels, reefers, carriers that frequent the port, and looking at data back 3 years to 4 years, creating a profile for that particular port. There were 4 ports that were identified, and list vessels that are of high interest. And I think another point to just to point out here is that the 3 pillars on the port profiling program that we've conducted with the team in Africa is basically, one is looking at the activity of vessels that frequent the port. Once we gather that, what are the processes that we, as a country, what are the processes and questions that we need to, and vessels we need to put on the list as high alerts, and sharing that information within that region. And like I said, here in the Pacific, we are quite ahead of that, and as someone from the Pacific, I'm quite blessed to see that we are quite ahead in terms of regional cooperation, bilateral relationships that is really well established. This is the team. For those of you who are quite interested if you're interested to look at the tool, look at some of the tools and the data sets that I've mentioned. I'm free, and you can always reach out, and I'm more than happy to take you through the tools and show you some of the features that it has. But in terms of working in the region, this is the team. I believe Kathleen and the team are well aware of Amy, who was well engaged in last year's Catfish event. But yeah, if there's ever any interest in looking at the platforms or the tools, feel free to reach out. I'll be around today and tomorrow. I'm happy to take you through a tour of what we have. Nakabaliw.
Thanks so much, Epeli. Very interesting. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Nope. Oh, Francis?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Very nice to see the case studies. My question is, now that you start to pull in these alternative data sources like the lights and the radar and such like, you know, how much more fishing activity are you seeing as a consequence of that? That's the sort of first question. And then even with that, how much fishing activity do you think you still do not see? Is there, do you have any sort of feel for that in terms of ground truthing and such like?
Thanks for that question. There was when particularly the SAR data set and the optical imagery data set, when it first came out and was published, there was a study that the team did at the back of North Korea about the dark fishing vessels that were happening around those shores, and we were quite surprised. The team at that time, I hadn't joined the team at that time, but reading through the reports and reading through and having those conversations with the analysts who crunched down on those data, they were quite surprised to see the amount of illegal fishing or dark vessels around that area. So yes, I know with those data sets included, there's definitely that added edge of seeing dark vessels. But I had a conversation with Nate about this just before the break. In terms of the SAR data set and also optical imagery, there's always an added element of really working closely with analysts within the team to actually look at the data sets and crunch it really well to see, for example, if there's suspicious dark fishing vessels or dark vessels within a certain region. We have instances within the platform where you have the dark radar matched with AIS or non-matched. So coming back to my point, it's always great when there's a suspicious of dark vessels in a certain region or area. It's always great to work with the team on the back end and have a look a bit in depth on that particular end. In terms of the second part to your question, if we have started to seeing that there's a decrease or there's more, sorry, or
just how much do you think you're actually capturing? Is there still do you still think there's a significant part of the fleet out there that is going unobserved?
Yes, my personal opinion, yes. I had a conversation about this with engineers who work on the back end of developing our SAR data set, and yes, and I think that's part of the reason why within the strategy there's this eagerness to just invest in a bit more in terms of these data sets, because even though there's we are able, using SAR data sets and optical imagery, to look at dark vessels in a certain area, there's always issues of spoofing activity, and like the MB Nika, just not using that broadcasting or not broadcasting even. So there's certainly a feel from the team that there's more to do in that area, and I feel with enough data set, like any algorithm or machine learning or even data in general, once we get more data, I think we'll begin to see more dark vessels. But applauding, like in the region, I've asked him this question: what about dark vessels in the region? In here, as a Pacific Islander, asking, and they said no. There's the region is quite ahead in terms of dark vessels, and one of the things I'll keep on reiterating, I really thank FFA, the Secretary, WCPFC, who have invested a lot in this space. When we compare ourselves to, say, African region, EU Med, Latin America as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good, thank you. There's another question in the back.
Thank you. First of all, Epeli, as a fellow Pacific Islander, I would just like to say that I'm really proud of the work that you're doing. It's always refreshing to see fellow colleagues break out of so many barriers to go and work with the likes of Francisco Blaha and other regional and international organizations. So congratulations and good job so far. My question is on I know that you're using a very complex database. Is it a platform? And you mentioned that there could be users who could just sign in and probably if the data is open for public consumption and also for public reporting.
Naka, great question. Yes, the platform is open and accessible to anyone who wants to use it. In terms of if you're coming, if you're asking the question from a coding or programming personnel, of course the codes are there online. You can always consume that and crunch down on that aspect a bit more. But in terms of what the data that you see feeding off from the map, you can certainly download that from the platform, and happy to take you through that process if there's interest around that area. But coming back or circling back to your main question, yes, it's open, it's easily accessible. You can easily create a login using your Google or Gmail account or even a Facebook account, or I'm not sure about Instagram, I have to ask that one. But yeah, I've heard Facebook accounts or even Google account, you can create an account easily